From ABC in New York, this is World News Tonight, Sunday, with Sam Donaldson.
Good evening. The U.S. Embassy in Tehran has been invaded and occupied by Iranian students. The Americans inside have been taken prisoner, and according to a student spokesman, will be held as hostages until the deposed Shah is returned from the United States, where he's receiving medical treatment for cancer. Some reports say as many as 90 Americans may be involved. Others say as few as 35. A look at what has happened in Tehran, as narrated by Richard Anderson.
The American hostages were blindfolded, handcuffed, and marched out on the U.S. Embassy's front steps by the revolutionary students. The Iranians had fought U.S. Marine guards for 3 hours for control of the embassy. The Marines used tear gas, but were eventually overrun at 5 o'clock this morning, New York time, as revolutionary guards and local police stood by and watched. While the Iranians burned an American flag in front of the embassy, they said the takeover had the express blessing of the Ayatollah Khomeini. In return for their American hostages' freedom, they're demanding the United States give up the deposed Shah of Iran from his hospital bed in New York to stand trial before a people's court. Until that is done, the demonstrators refuse to make any promises about the fate of the American hostages. Immediately after the takeover, the crowd put up pictures of the Ayatollah and a banner identifying themselves as Khomeini followers. Iranian women wearing the traditional black chadors could be seen inside the compound gate. Outside, newsmen and women waited for any information. But one fact is clear tonight, that for the second time in a year, Khomeini demonstrators in Tehran have overrun the American embassy and now appear in control of as many as 90 American lives. Richard Anderson, ABC News.
The action against the embassy may or may not have been ordered by Iran's religious leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini. That is not clear, but it does appear to have his blessing. A spokesman in the holy city of Qom said the move has the Ayatollah's personal support, which adds to Washington's difficulty in trying to resolve this dangerous situation. Ted Koppel, our diplomatic correspondent, is standing by at the State Department with the latest on that. Ted?
The State Department is doing what it can, but for the moment at least, that doesn't appear to be much. There has been no direct contact with the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. That building is under the total control of the demonstrators. During the takeover, by coincidence, the senior American diplomat in Iran, Bruce Langan, the charge d'affaires, was at the foreign ministry. He has remained there throughout the day, acting as Washington's main link to the Iranian government. The State Department has set up a special task force in a small room next to the operations center. The force is headed by Assistant Secretary of State Harold Saunders. But Secretary of State Vance himself came in this morning, stayed until early afternoon, and twice briefed President Carter, who's up at Camp David, by phone. So far, official comments about the incident have been a model of restraint, an expression of concern for the safety of American personnel and property, and a statement of appreciation that the Iranian government has made some efforts to resolve the matter. Sam?
Ted, the Ayatollah's support for this action is ominous, is it not?
Well, it may or may not be ominous. The State Department is making a particular point to distinguish the Ayatollah Khomeini from the Iranian government. That's why it's being so restrained in its direct references to the government.
It seems to me this is another situation where a lot of people's first instinct might be to use military force, but apparently Washington is not going to do that.
Well, first of all, it probably wouldn't work, Sam, and secondly, in one word, oil. Washington is tremendously concerned about Iran's oil supplies and our need for them, and of course concerned about the safety of those Americans still at the embassy.
Thank you very much, Ted. Here in New York, where the Shah is undergoing chemotherapy treatment for cancer, Iranian students chained themselves to the Statue of Liberty and unfurled banners demanding that the Shah be returned to Iran for punishment. The demonstrators were cut loose by police and taken into custody.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings in London, Max Robinson in Chicago. Part 1 of our special assignment series, Children of Fear. And from our desk in Washington, Frank Reynolds.
Good evening. Some 60 Americans are still being held hostage in the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. And here in Washington, there is a growing sense of helplessness as well as outrage. The civilian government of Iran, headed by Prime Minister Bazargan, resigned today, and the students, or whoever have seized the embassy, have threatened to kill the hostages if the U.S. makes any military move to rescue them. So both the White House and the State Department today again ruled out the use of force to save the captive Americans. We have a series of reports tonight. First, with this exclusive account of today in Tehran, here is Bob Dyke.
It is a sight to make any American here in Tehran feel insecure. Hundreds of Iranian demonstrators outside the U.S. Embassy calling for the death of President Carter. One poster showed the president tied to a stake, ready for execution beside the former Shah. To the demonstrators, the speedy seizure of the embassy and its occupants is the best thing to have happened here since the Islamic Revolution, the fall of the Shah and the rise of the Ayatollah Khomeini. The students in control of the ground held another news conference today. They did not, as they had promised earlier, allow reporters to see any of the Americans held captive in a nearby building. But they did issue a warning to the United States government that any overt attempt to free the hostages would have tragic results.
In case the United States decide to do something like Entebbe airport, as the Israelis did it in Uganda, if they want to do something like this, to release these hostages, you must be sure that they will definitely be killed.
The student spokesman also said that the embassy and its people will be held indefinitely. Their ransom demands that the United States return the exiled Shah to Iran to stand trial. We think, said the spokesman, that the hostages are more important for the United States than the Shah. Here in Tehran tonight, there are reliable reports that student activists have taken 2 more U.S. citizens into custody. They are William Royer and Catherine Cook of the Iran American Society. The report says Monday they were taken from their office to the U.S. Embassy where they were locked up. Bob Dyke, ABC News, Tehran.
This is Ted Koppel at the State Department. Since this crisis began, the U.S. government hasn't had a great deal of leverage in Iran. Now it has even less. The only officials left at the Foreign Ministry in Tehran are second-rank functionaries who themselves don't know how much authority they have. State Department spokesman Harding Carter summed up the dilemma of negotiating with what is almost a phantom government.
We continue to contact whatever officials are available to discuss the matter with them. We are clearly in a changing situation, and which we simply must await now the accession to power of whatever group represents the Revolutionary Council, whoever it is that's going to run the place.
State Department officials have tried calling the U.S. Embassy in Tehran directly. Whoever answered the phone won't talk to them. So the U.S. government, deeply concerned about the welfare of those 60-odd Americans inside the embassy compound, is reduced to announcing in effect that someone will be held responsible if anything happens to those people.
We have announced what our position is, which is that we expect them to be held without harm and released, and that continues to be the position.
Even that mild warning carries less clout today than it did yesterday, since the question of who is responsible awaits the formation of a new government. No consideration, however, is being given to any military option. President Carter met this morning with his senior advisors, and the central concern remains what it's been since Sunday: doing nothing to jeopardize the lives of those 60 to 65 Americans. Ted Koppel, ABC News at the State Department.
Since his appointment by Ayatollah Khomeini last February, he's continually been overruled by the Ayatollah and the Islamic Revolutionary Council. Bazargan once called Tehran the city of 100 sheriffs. The constant making of policy in the streets led him to say the government's day had been turned into night. Demonstrations such as this will be banned tomorrow by order of Ayatollah Khomeini after reports that a pro-Bazargan show of strength was in the making. The Islamic Revolutionary Council is largely a secret body, mostly clerics loyal to Khomeini. One of its most influential members is this man, Mohammad Beheshti. He said today Iran is in need of stability, but like Khomeini, he is determined to rid Iran of any American influence. Ayatollah Khomeini has made it clear the occupation of the embassy is a direct result of the Shah's presence in the United States. In this interview with German television, he also said the United States did not want peace and order restored in Iran, that plans had been found in the embassy which proved, in Khomeini's view, wherever there was unrest in Iran, the United States had a finger. Late today, the Islamic Revolutionary Council asked ministers in Prime Minister Bazargan's government to stay on the job. That would help confirm widespread concern in Iran that the clergy is less than capable of running the government's machinery. Frank?